You're able to enjoy things that you're able to critique. You see what I'm saying? I'm a fan of David Banner. I think David Banner is a good person. I think David Banner is a wonderful intellectual. I did disagree with him in this instance. This video that I'm about to play from David Banner is from 6 years ago on an interview that he did on the Breakfast Club. The reason why I'm talking about this video now is because it came across my Instagram timeline and an individual did send it to me. Shout out to Malcolm Bates, you know what I'm saying? He sent it to me in text message and I told him I'd do a video over it because I thought that it could be a great educational tool.
It's not white people's racism that's the problem, it's black people's lack of racism.
Before I get into the criticism of this video, I want to acknowledge that I like the OG. I mess with David Banner and we cool. You know what I'm saying? I don't know him like that, but I'm cool with David Banner. I just think that he has misspoken and made a lot of racially illiterate claims when he's really trying to talk about black people practicing racial kinship amongst ourselves and trying to center the white individual acts of people while simultaneously ignoring the actions of white institutions. We understand that the industry or system of banking, when it comes to money circulation in this country, you can't talk about being a go-getter or being a black millionaire or a black millionaire without talking about how the system of banking operates within that and how the industry of banking is structured by anti-blackness. Meaning there is something unique about white over black, light over dark, even when we think about who gets what, when, where, and how, especially pertaining to money. You feel me? So when we start thinking about subliminally black people not liking each other, think about all of the economic, financial incentives for black people to sell out, to be a Uncle Tom, to be white supremacist sympathizers, to be anti-black apologists. We recognize that even within rap music, there has been a plethora of black millionaires that have been able to pop. See what I'm saying? We also know that they're implicated within distancing themselves from blackness and black people in ways that make it harder for the next black person to climb the ladder. We know that. We also know that the way in which black people deal with exploitation, you feel me, and shit being stolen from us is very unique. Or people get like this. When you think about how the business owners and entrepreneurship in the black community shows up, it's not coincidental that they usually not black. For y'all that haven't seen it, I recently did a video about why so many Asian-owned businesses are in the black community, why I did through history, through policy, through different events, being able to show and illustrate how and why this reality came about. We understand that was done by institutions, by systems. You know, my grandfather always said that every group has an asshole and everybody got an opinion, and opinions like assholes that usually stink, right? I go further in that and say, like, you know what? Everybody is assholes and every group has assholes. The difference is when you're able to have an institution or a system that can back you up and enforce you in being an asshole. When you think about how Donald Trump was trying to pass the Platinum Plus plan in 2020, it's a reason why he was trying to deceptively say that he was going to give the black community $500 billion. Because he was acknowledging that politically, socially, economically, black people face disparities. And regardless of how many books I've read, regardless of how many degrees I've got, regardless of how many followers I got, unless that shit stamped on my forehead, it's always going to be something unique about being black. Not only amongst other black people, but within the world. When I first came into being conscious or being woke, one of the first quotes I heard was about how black people are so conditioned, our conditioning is conditioned. And when I hear David Banner speak on things like this, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. It's how we so conditioned, our conditioning is conditioned. But you don't think about it in a defeatist way where it's like, oh, I'm conditioned, so I'm black and I'm down, so I might as well just sit in the house and cry racism. No. Power is the ability to define the phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. And I hope through watching this video, you have the ability to better define the phenomenon to make it act in a desired manner. Before we begin to the video, before I go further in this video, let's make sure we have a working definition of racism. That way we all know when I say racism, exactly what is being meant. What is being said. Not only would I define racism as prejudice plus power equals racism, I also can go with this little, the dictionary definition people use like I'm talking about. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by individual, community, or institution against a person or people on bias of their membership to a particular racial ethnic group. Within the definition, that definition from Oxford, that racism is defined against another people, not being for your people. I want to repeat that. Racism is defined in being opposition to a people because of their race and not being for your people because of their race. You see what I'm saying?
You only talk about white supremacy. I don't see a problem in racism anymore. Watch this. Race is the root word. Root is the word ism, and it is the act of the word, right? So when white people are supposed to take care of white people first, they supposed to get themselves Grammys first and the movies first. Because don't lions take care of lions? Tigers take care of tigers? And it's not white people's racism that's the problem. It's black people's lack of racism. We're supposed to be racist too, and we're not. We got to make black people love themselves again. Yes, sir. That's the reason. It's psychology. It's not business. Because people say, well, you got to get black people the key to business, David Banner. You're a multimillionaire without music. How can you teach black people? Well, the truth is, I can tell you how to do it. But if you don't like black people, subliminally, if you do love black people, take black people in movies, for example. Think about it. The list of white artists, actors, you can't pay them to be in a black movie. Do you see the black productions? You see them? Give 40 billion to it, and then, Charlamagne said something about 40 billion to a thing. And I apologize for the reading, but copywriting issue.
I agree when David Banner says that we have to teach black people how to love ourselves, which begs the question. In the words of Malcolm X,
who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
We gotta really unpackage how there has been a conditioning of black people, that our conditioning is so conditioning that our condition has been conditioned. You see what I'm saying? What we know is that there was a concerted effort politically, socially, and economically to make it where black people viewed ourselves as inferior. And as a result, anybody that looked like us was also inferior. You see what I'm saying? Y'all remember that movie, Juice? You see what I'm saying? When Bishop Tupac told the dude, you feel me, you ain't shit. And the minute that I expect that, he said, I ain't shit, and you ain't shit.
I ain't shit. I ain't never gonna be shit. And you less of a man than me, so as soon as I decide that you ain't gonna be.
What we know is that the way in which black inferiority is internalized in our community, it impacts the way in which we spend money with black people. It impacts the way in which we want to build with black people. So when you talk about the idea that black people should be more racist, I'm thinking like, what does that mean? You see what I'm saying? Because when you define racism outside of power or domination, it allows for you to maybe say anybody can be racist. So then you can say with so much confidence that it's not white people's racism that's the problem. It's the lack of black people's racism. Because then I start to ask questions, right? I start to ask questions like, what does racism from black people to white people look like? What does racism of black people look like? When we think about how racism operates and we think about black people being racist, are there any structural, institutional, organizational type of things you can talk about in terms of black folks being racist? And then we start getting into the racial illiteracy.
Watch this. Race is the root word. Root is the root word. Ism and ist is the act of the word, right?
We see that David Banner is using the word racism as a blank slate that can mean anything. And what he actually is talking about is racial kinship. We know that racism is defined by being able to have prejudice or discrimination or, something negative against an individual based on their skin color that usually involves an institution, an organization, a government, and we know that racism is typically deals with minorities being the victim and people that are not minorities, being the perpetuators of racism. What we know is that white people putting each other first, that's not racism. White people practicing kinship amongst each other, that's not racism. Black people putting black people first, it's not racism. Black people practicing racial kinship is not racism. When you bring this metaphor about lions taking care of lions and tigers taking care of tigers, we can acknowledge that in this metaphor, racism would be a lion oppressing a tiger because it is a tiger. Not the idea of a lion putting a lion first because it's a lion. And when we recognize how these type of thinking deeply about shallow things, make sure y'all get the merch, leads us to drawing our own understanding. This is what leads to racial illiteracy, leading into racial violence or racial exclusion. Because when we think about it in terms of economics, right, we know that Black people are about 7.5 times more likely of being wrongfully convicted of murder in the U.S. than whites. And we also know that Black borrowers, when it comes to money, has a higher denial rate, 27%, than white buyers, who has the lowest of 13%. So when we think about how structures and institutions operate, it's more than Black people being able to make these individual decisions to make institutions treat us better. Here on this map right here, we have a plethora of different Black massacres. Where we had Black people spending money with Black people, Black lawyers, Black doctors, Black schools, Black principals, Black teachers, all that. That did not make these areas immune to being massacred. Them practicing kinship and racial pride did not make them immune to dealing with the structures of white supremacy. So at the beginning of the video, when David Banner says that you only focus on white supremacy, you don't only focus on racism, how can one only focus on white supremacy while ignoring racism? And to be clear, there's obviously a distinction between white supremacy and racism. White supremacy being specifically centering white people and superiority of white people, and racism having to do with just the various ways people can make distinctions based off of race. Them two different things. What we know though is that focusing on the material reality of Black community and how we practice, you know what I'm saying, spending money with each other, that is a result of how we have internalized Black inferiority. He says that there's no way for me to teach Black people business if you subliminally still don't like Black people. You know, Carnegie Woodson had a few quotes about this, actually. I think it fits very smoothly. That's able to illustrate more of kind of being able to ask the question, why? You know, the purpose of this video is to be able to give you the ability to understand racism in ways where you can identify it, explain it, and have terminology to be able to say what you mean and mean what you say in ways, right? And what I was able to learn from Carnegie Woodson, the father of Negro History Week that turned into Black History Month, so technically Carnegie Woodson is the father of Black History Month, he had this book entitled The Miseducation of the Negro. And he had some quotes in there that I feel like is real damning that could, I think, help us understand why we shouldn't conflate structural racism with understandings of individual racism, and understanding how these two things are distinctions, and how when we start having dialogue around racism and race, that is usually one that wants to mitigate in every instance of racism only being about people, only being about individual acts. When we know that there are different institutions that are able to sustain this reality that we know, regardless of how proud Black folks are of each other. You see what I'm saying? You know, Malcolm X said that the white man has done something wrong to you, and it's your responsibility to do something about that. With that being said, I'm not trying to invade Black people's bodily autonomy and accountability or responsibility and doing something about our own situations. What I'm just getting into is how when Huey P. Newton says that power is the ability to define the phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner, I'm recognizing that there's a phenomenon that is operating that literally gets Black people to buy into the inferiority of our own people, and then it literally discourages us from being around Black folks, from spending money with Black folks, from giving opportunities to Black folks. A lot of us can really be real and recognize that a lot of the times when we define success or failure in the Black community, success and failure is always defined in its proximity to white people, and it's a proximity away from Black people. We know that in the Black community, when it comes to thinking about how successful one can be, it is usually measured in how close can you get to whiteness and white people. And we know that when it comes to thinking about how much of a failure Black folks is, it's usually defined in how close are you still to Blackness and Black folks. Don't we recognize how that's going to impact the way that we build economics, institutions, education? When I'm getting at the miseducation of the Negro, I'm able to point out how within 2023, white people's education is a part of the core curriculum. There's no way for you to graduate from high school and not know what white people have done in the Western world and you not being seen as a good student. There is a way for you to graduate with a 4.0 valedictorian, salutatorian, and not know a lick of Black history or anything about the Black reality. This also has impacted the way in which Black people are subliminally not loving each other. See what I'm saying? And I think that when you start talking about the way in which White people don't love each other and say, oh man, in order for us to do something about how people messing us up, we gotta do something with us first. I think that when people make that statement, it's not done with nuance. It comes off as like some pathological victim blaming. The reason why the niggas can't do good is because it's not doing good. It's just like, that's not necessarily the reality of what's going on. You see what I'm saying? When people want to romanticize Black Wall Street, everything that Barron said that Black people were not doing, they was doing. But they still had to be face to face and confronted with racial violence, with white supremacist violence. Another reason I like this video is because I know that when we misdiagnose racism, it can lead into not only Black inferiority, but people having bad faith for how the world operates and literally internalize and feel like something is wrong with them because the world is telling them, hey man, the reason why Black folks ain't got nothing is because y'all don't love each other. So instead of you getting mad that banks are denying Black people opportunities, instead of you being mad that schools are teaching Black people more about white history than Black history, you should just think about the way Black folks should love each other more. It's like, why? Even if you believe, hey, the reason why the Black community is the way it is because Black folks don't love each other. Why? Why don't we love each other? What happened that made it where we don't love each other? How long have we not been loving each other? Who benefits politically from us not loving each other? Who stands to economically gain from us not loving each other? And I think that those are the questions that kind of need to be got because, you know, it's deeper than this talking about hiring practices, right? It's deeper than this talking about representation in film. What we know is that even when Black people show up in white films and we're depicted in very stereotypical ways, we know that literally leads to how people viewing that film and like internalizes ideas about themselves. And we also know just because you represented in the film doesn't mean you depicted good. You see what I'm saying? Just vice versa. We know that we can think of various different Black directors, Black film, you know what I'm saying, people that have white folks in their movies. So thinking about, well, white people being Black people movies, to me, that's semantics. You see what I'm saying? It's semantics and it obscures how power really operates. Because white supremacy is always trying to consume Black people. White supremacy is always already trying to make Blackness and Black people fungible. So pointing out that Black people can be used in a movie is not really that unique. Or pointing out that white folks don't hire Black people for movies is kind of like, it's empirically false. The reason why I think it's important for us to talk very intentionally is because on the internet, there is a lot of information, right? What I seen on Spiritual World, that's where I got the video from, people in the comment section said, about time somebody with a platform say this. And what I would say is that though, even if you can acknowledge what David Banner was trying to say, you have to acknowledge the words and what he actually said. What I think David Banner was trying to get at is that Black people need to recognize that we've internalized Black inferiority, and the way that we relate to each other and spend money with each other impacts the way that we really, really move because we subliminally don't like each other. You see what I'm saying? Instead of saying, I don't have an issue with racism anymore. It's not that white folks are racist, it's that Black folks ain't racist enough. When it comes to the Supreme Court overruling, affirmative action, how can Black folks being more racist account for us being more led into white institutions? It doesn't. You see what I'm saying? When we think about the way in which Black people or Black men uniquely or 3 times more likely to be convicted, how can Black men being more hateful to other races help us not be incarcerated? It doesn't. You see what I'm saying? So at best, it's like, hey, even though, the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions, and I acknowledge that David Banner did not have negative intentions, the words that he said were dangerous. See what I'm saying? And though he said them 6 years ago, I hope that David Banner has grown since the situation. David Banner, if you see this video, brother, I respect you. You know what I'm saying? I got a lot of love and respect for you. I met you in Bryan College Station, my hometown, a long, long time ago. And David Banner, though, peep game, bro. This is a people moment. David Banner, I'm a youngster. Compared to you, definitely, you my OG, right? I respect what you have done for Black music, for the Black community, for Black culture. I just think that when you got on the Breakfast Club in this interview, you misspoke in different ways that could lead to violence to Black people and people like me and you that talk about racial progression, talk about racial independence. It literally can lead to pathology for you and I, make our job harder. You see what I'm saying? Because when I make videos, I define racism as being power plus prejudice equals racism. And I make the claim that Black people don't have institutional power. And then you say that Black people should be more racist. It's like, okay, in reality, where is the other racism that you're speaking of? And to be clear, like, people that don't know, I have a policy debate background. And what I'm attempting to do is attack the argument and not the debater. I'm attempting to attack the things that David Banner said that I disagree with and not attacking David Banner as a person. You know what I mean? I know on the internet, a lot of times we throw the baby out with the bathwater. We feel like, hey, just because an individual said some bad shit on Wednesday, we got to throw them out every other instance. You know what I'm saying? I don't operate on that. I'm not saying that man is a bad person or taking away his intellect. I'm just saying the way in which he spoke, the way in which he's illustrated how he's lost in the sauce of racial illiteracy in this instance deserved a little bit of education as elevation, a little bit of research over research. You know what I'm saying? To be clear, racism is not about putting your race first. Racism is about oppressing other races exactly because of that. They're another race. Education is elevation. Let me know in this video if y'all want me to put my visual right here of the different massacres. Let me know if y'all want me to do a series of videos on each one of these different Black massacres where Black people were practicing political, social, economic group building. And, you know what I'm saying, having our own economy and our own shit, and people broke it down. Like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, and consciously be cooking. To be cooking in this, you know what I'm saying, this office. And if you ever want to think a little differently about some shit you would think about your whole life, tap in. Education is elevation. Research over research. theconsciously.com. Go check it out for all merchant looking questions. I'll holla.